occupation makes no sense historically, given the history of the Washington, D.C. But can you elucidate for us, what, in your opinion, needs to be happening right now in response to this occupation, first of all? And then secondly, we'll all talk about what we should be doing about this threat to the Smithsonian. He don't want to talk about no slavery, right? He doesn't want to talk about no Jim Crow. He doesn't want to talk about all that. He wants to talk about the greatness, quote, of American history. Adjoa, what do you got to say?
Well, I think, first of all, they're both connected. I don't think that the Smithsonian, the attack on the Smithsonian and our history is separate and apart from the attack on D.C., because that's still an attack on history, as Dr. Kaye laid out. And we put forward, I shared some of the data. It's a continuation of the founding of this country, which was founded on the white supremacy, the false statement, the false view that somehow whites are better than blacks. So from the very beginning, the country was founded on the lie about us. So it served as the basis for, and the embrace of that allowed for us to be enslaved. Because, of course, we weren't as good as, we were animals, we were this, that, and the other. And so that history is connected. And we have made great strides. I am not one to say that there have not been strides. But we are still living under and within a context of a lie. The lie about who we are, the lie about what how we came to be where we are, the disparities, Barbara, that many of us have worked on for years. I was focused many years on the criminal punishment system, still do some of that. And we look at voting, look at all the struggles and work that we're still working on. These grew up out of the founding of this country as a white supremacist country. We talk about the genocide of the Native American. If we look at all the treatment of people within this country, the system itself has allowed for, and we keep fighting against the inhumane system, because they've created that. What is happening in D.C., what we need to do, people need to follow the lead of NCBL, ASADA, so many others. I don't want to name, because people say, well, you left off my organization. People have been issuing statements. We need to continue to scream it. We need to put it out there in all our venues. We need people to join the demonstration on September 6th if you can. If you can't be there physically, join it in spirit. We need people to speak out about it. And we need people to not be afraid. I was listening to one program, and somebody asked yesterday, I'm blanking on the person's name, who was the head of it, leading the discussion, but it was one of those MSNBC programs. And somebody said, but people are afraid to speak out. He says, you have to speak out through your fear. You cannot allow this to go unchallenged, because Trump and his administration are attacking people who they have designated as being, or have stood up against them before, or didn't side with them before. But we cannot be afraid, or even if we are fearful, we have to walk through that fear. Because if we don't act, if we don't raise our voices, Barbara, you were talking some month, maybe a month or more ago, about the data, about how do you fight back fascism. You got to get a certain percentage out there on the street. I remember, I forget the percentage, but I remember you sharing that. We must fight. We must fight in every avenue that we can. Fighting through writing, fighting through speaking, fighting through joining demonstrations. Learn how to protect ourselves. I remember in the day, we used to have our own security when we were out there marching to help protect us, so that we were protected against the violence against us. Not that they would initiate violence. I'm not talking about that. But we need to make sure that our groups are trained If we say we have to be nonviolent, we do have to be nonviolent, because that'll just be an excuse for even more violence from the National Guard and others. But we have to train people. You can't just say, go out there and do da-da-da-da-da. We have to reinitiate the training. NCBL did it for the Free DC, the DC Statehood movement years ago. The NCBL and National Lawyers Guild connected and did trainings for how do we have peaceful demonstrations. What'll do if the police come? You go limp. You don't fight. You go limp. And so we have to reinitiate that work, but we must fight in every way we can.
I agree. Can I add a point about the data piece? I love what my sister said about data and fighting back through. This is part of the educational piece. I recently spoke on a panel at the American Bar Association conference, and I asked a group of primarily white lawyers, what industry have African Americans taken over where you think now there's too many of us? In the context of trying to push back on DE&I. I also asked them, please give me a list of every unqualified black person who has a job that you don't think they deserve.
Uh-oh.
And they were silent.
Yes.
Because when you push them on data, we're still less than 3% of the legal population, right?
That's right.
Okay? We're still less than 5% of doctors and engineers and accountants. So besides athletics and entertainment, where they feel comfortable with us because we're entertaining them, what professional industry are we in where there's too many of us? And when you push them on data, they're often silent, which speaks to their real motivation, which is frankly rooted in they don't like to compete or to be challenged by people who they have been taught they're better than, going back to the lie. And so I think it's critically important in this moment that part of our resistance is educating people around the data, and that and pushing people to really think about, okay, you think DEI people are not qualified. Name them. Give me the names. Tell us who's not qualified. Is Cory Booker not qualified to be a U.S. Senator? Really? Was Barack Obama not qualified to be president? And name the people that you think are in positions, and then, of course, as one of my white colleagues said, and when you do that, she wants to give you a list of all the white men in positions who she also knows are not qualified.
Right. Right.
No, we can
can I add something in here, Barbara?
Oh, yes. Go ahead,
when you have a chance. Yes. No, because I think what my good colleague is laying down in terms of pushing people on the data, we do the same thing in terms of pushing people on the history. And I think we're both saying the same thing, that in order to get people to recognize what is honest and what is true in this moment, you have to begin by figuring out what they know. We know this when we deal with children. I can't teach you anything new. Let me figure out what you know, because maybe I might have to do some unteaching first before I can teach you some new things. But I find that when I work with students, I have to spend some time unteaching the lies that they have been taught, the lies that they have believed, because that was what was offered to them as truth. We have to be honest about the fact that we start talking about white privilege and black consciousness, that's across the board. This notion of black consciousness is something that we have to deal with in our community. Because as Zora said, all skin folk ain't kin folks. We got to be clear who is in front and who is supposed to be giving us the information, which is why folks that are armed with the data, armed with the knowledge, and armed with the passion and truth and teaching about who we are need to be out in the street. Asala is pushing freedom schools. I tell people, you need to turn every environment that you're in into a place where you're teaching the true history. You have to refute every lie. I mean, I can be at Starbucks ordering my, half cafe latte, and I'm like, you know what? Does anyone here know who Ella Baker is? Like, turn every space that you have into a freedom space, because we've got to counteract the narrative
that is being shaped and formed. We understand why authoritarian fascist regimes want to control the media, because if you control the media, you control the message. Thankfully, there's a democratization that's taking place in the media, reaching people on the platforms you have. When I see friends of mine and they're posting about their food and their dates and their shoes, I'm like, do you understand we're in a fascist regime? Use that platform to teach somebody what's going on. Like, we are no longer at the point, we no longer have the luxury to talk about what we're going to do tonight, how we're hanging out. Those days are gone. We should be training our children in how to defend themselves against what is happening. I put on my Facebook page, for example, I said, I'm no longer giving advice on how to save democracy. Democracy's done. We're pro-democracy. We're post-democracy at this point. I need to teach you how to survive and overthrow fascism and how to rebuild our communities once we've overthrown it. Because we're talking 30 to 50 years out in terms of the work that needs to be done. And are we preparing our children for the work they're going to have to do to pick up what we have broken, and we've got to teach them how to repair it.
And let's stop for a minute for my audience. Everybody, when we're talking about fascism, we're talking about what Hitler did with his dictatorship. We're talking about the lack of personal freedoms, where you suspend the Constitution, where nobody has any Bill of Rights. No First Amendment, no Second Amendment. Well, they love Second Amendment because they think all their people are run out and get guns and shoot us. But there's no Fourth Amendment, no Eighth Amendment, no 13th, no 14th, no 15th. I mean, all the amendments are gone, and there's no right to counsel. There's no Fifth Amendment, no Sixth Amendment, nothing. So what I want people to understand is that when we talk about fascism, I don't want that to be a word that people are like, I'm not sure what they're talking about. We're talking about the attempt to make America a dictatorship, where one man, one party tells everybody what to do. And the difference between now and then is that this dictatorship that Trump is trying to impose is just racist to its core. And it's always, fascism and racism are twins. They always are, together. You never find them separate. And it's important for us to understand that when he's, I told people when he started attacking, quote, immigrants, that it was only 1 minute before he would turn on black folks. And he has now begun to really turn on black folks who have always been his weapon of choice, because that's who his base hates, but let's talk about a new poll. There are 2 polls that I wanted to put out here for us to talk about. Then I want to come back and talk about freedom schools. But there are 2 polls out. One just came out, and it's a brand new poll, came out this weekend. It's a Gallup poll, and it shows that a majority of Americans, a supermajority of black Americans, believe that anti-black racism is widespread in the United States. 64% of Americans who think this particular brand of racism is widespread is tied with with the polls from 2021. It is the highest figure recorded in history of periodic polls since 2008. And despite that, President Trump saying that the biggest problem out there is anti-white racism, incredibly, only 29% of the respondents in the latest poll believes that is widespread. This is a drop. This is a drop from 2016 when Trump was first elected, where 41% of all people said that anti-white racism was a problem. So there's been a huge shift that's going on. Is this a reason, folks, for why we're seeing some of this anti-black racism being promoted so hard by this president right now? The other thing, it's a new poll out that came out August 8th that I want to make sure that people are aware of. It shows that African Americans, their support for Trump has dropped dramatically since May. Dramatically. a 25% drop in support. Only 11% of African Americans are saying that they support Trump. 84% are saying no, no, hell no to Trump's policies. This is, as I mentioned, a 25% shift in the last 3 months. That tells us a lot. I'm going to go to you, Juan, first. How do you interpret those numbers?